So the input that I would like to make is focusing on leading in the new normal, do's and don'ts for real new work transformation. Can you see the full screen? Is that good for you? Yeah. Okay. Let me see. I will start. Let me see. I will start with a description that describes the development towards a new world of working that starts way before the recent corona influences. More than 90% of the companies were on the way towards a new world of work before corona. And what is the big trend here? The starting point is often a highly standardized work where, in a simplified form, we could say you buy the hands of people for execution. Then companies realized that here in our region is not enough to just buy the hands. We need smart people. We need knowledge workers. We need the best educated people. We need experienced people. So that one was the way to go. And then there were two mega trends, and that showed us clearly having smart individuals working in silos is by far not enough. The big trends, the digital transformation introduced a transformation in all industries at the same time with regard to the business model, with the customer interfaces, as well as the processes inside of companies. And that had never happened to that extent before, that all industries at the same time, more or less without exception, were confronted with this massive need to change. And this change is accompanied by rapid change, or the need to work with enormous speed and acceleration. That's one big trend. The other one is the demographic change, and that is the war for talent here, which we were talking about for ages already, but now it's becoming tangible already with regard to certain groups. Engineers, here one group, we have doctors, we have all digital workers. We can sense that already, or now not only doctors, but also the nurses and the personnel that we need in the hospitals here. It's very tangible. But the actual massive demographic shift will start in 25. And that will be the year where we have just, in terms of numbers, not enough people for the jobs that we have to fill. And then it will shift even more. Both megatrends suggest that we need different forms of work, namely a kind of network organization that allows us to combine the knowledge and the experience and the ideas of smart people in a very flexible, agile form to address market changes, to be innovative, and to be attractive for people so that we can compete in both the digital transformation as well as in the demographic change. That was before Corona. And now, Corona came exactly into that movement towards a new world of work. And I would like to change some, to share some insights on the current challenges, but also opportunities that we learn from the work that we do with companies. We work already since 5 years with a group that's called Pioneering. That's 18 companies that have committed to be pioneers with regard to new work and leadership, and say, hey, we want to be the first to go new ways here, and we exchange very openly because we want to learn from each other and also not make all the mistakes ourselves. And so that is for our research one source of the experience. Then we work also in companies, we support them in practice, and we have massive data which we use to also create evidence to learn. And everything that I will share is based on these sources. The first one is more from the work that we do with pioneering, namely what are current challenges, what are also current opportunities in these crises. And I deliberately changed it. Originally, it was this crisis, one singular. Now we speak of crisis because we have not only the pandemia suggesting challenges, but also more and more massive the economic crisis in it. And both suggest not only positive things with regard to new work, but also come with certain challenges that make the new work sometimes particularly difficult. On the one hand, we have the economic crisis, the uncertainty with regard to the future, and we don't know what's going to happen in our industry. And often in a crisis, we get much more top-down leadership. The captain on the bridge telling you where to go, which is then a little bit competing with the new work. Also, we had during the lockdown and also in the recent weeks challenges with regard to new work and new leadership, laissez-faire leadership, fluid borders between private life and working life. We have that overheating, this collective stress experience. We have sometimes unclarity about home office, what is allowed and what is not allowed. And with regard to leadership, also sometimes this difficulty, how do I lead in a virtual setting? So these are some irritations that do not only support this transition towards new work, but also skepticism and more traditional, more conservative forces come up that said, hey, we need to go back. We need to have a more classical way of working again. The opportunities. We see massive opportunities here with regard to the business to say, hey, in that crisis, we can show that we are fast, that we are agile, that we are innovative, and that we can compete in that crisis. We have also particular opportunities with regard to dealing with people. Energizing people, empowering people, experimenting with new forms of collaboration, new technology in it. And I'm personally convinced, and that is based on the work that we do with companies, that during that crisis, we will see that companies that work in a positive form with their teams and are really positive in terms of collaboration, new work, new leadership, trust, empowerment, will be the winner of this crisis, not only in terms of the business, but also in terms of their culture, attractiveness, the loyalty of people, the commitment of people. And the others that are dominated by the challenges and also the disturbances, this overheating, distrust, going back to top-down leadership will be significantly weakened in that crisis. So I think we are in a very, very important time right now, and the way we deal with new work, with leadership, with the energy of people will make a significant difference in that time. So where do we stand? We try to make this topic as tangible as possible. Where do we stand in terms of new work here? And again, I will go back to some research that we have started already a long time ago, and which we can now apply during this particular time, and also show what do we have at the moment. We talk with companies, some opportunities, some challenges. They say, hey, on the one hand, we have experienced an immense agility. People tended at the moment, tended to be much more pragmatic. We were much faster. There was the special solidarity and cooperation across silos, across different units, to say, hey, let's all do our best in this time. That was especially during the lockdown, the particular experience of really, really positive energy and engagement here. At the same time, new work created uncertainty. We have also the experience that some companies seem to be overstrained. So we call it an enormous agility on the one hand, on the other hand, the risk of being overwhelmed, overheated, also exhausted. And we can see that also in some data that we collected. So already in 2016, we started to do also empirical quantitative research on this topic and published it also in 2016. What did we do in order to understand where do companies stand in terms of new work versus traditional work? We asked more than 19,000 people from 92 organizations. We asked them about eight different elements of new work. Virtual work, mobile work, flexible working hours, fluid work, so project-based work. I can go on to digital communication, digital devices, and individualized work settings. So, we ask all of them, do you use it? Do you not use it? And based on that, with regard to the 92 companies, we could classify the companies. Are they more operating in the modern world or are they working in a traditional form? A second dimension was, we were also asking, hey, what about performance? Are you more successful? Are you able to compete in that digital transformation? Are you more attractive here for in that war for talent? What about health, speed, financial performance? We did that survey now since 2016 on an annual basis. So every year we ask about between 15 and 20,000 people from between 80 and 100 companies, and then we could classify them. I just checked the data. They did not significantly change over the time, but they changed since in 2020, and that are the red numbers. Let us have a look. Based on their data, we could classify the companies, whether they are modern versus more traditional, and whether they are high performing versus low and average performing. And we get 4 types of companies. And what's particularly interesting is the successful pioneers. That are the companies that are in the modern world, that are highly successful and can use the full potential of new work. What we found, that was only 6% of the companies. The majority that entered the new world of work belonged to the modern overstrained. 3/4 of the companies that entered the new world of work were overwhelmed, or we had high levels of exhaustion, or what we call the acceleration trap, feeling that we are the hamster in a far too fast wheel in it. So that was striking for us first. We said, what's going on? Why are some of them much more agile and attractive and wonderful, successful, whereas others struggle? Another striking result was the classical high performance. 30% of the companies work in a traditional way, but highly successful. So we were also wondering what is going on there. We could see that over time it did not significantly change, otherwise I would have put the numbers over here. What I did put were the numbers that we collected between April and September. And that is about 5,000 people from 38 companies only. Only 38, but we take what we have during that time. 5,000 people, and we classified again on an org level the companies there, and you see even more overstrained, not more pioneers in it, and again 27% classical high performers and a large group of traditional mediocre. How can we explain that? weren't so many people forced to go in a home office, to work on a virtual basis? Yes. But what we had in the lockdown phase was not new work. New work is always linked to having a choice, giving people choices, where they work, when they work, how they work. And in many companies, we had forced presence before, and then we had forced home office. This is not free. This is not agile. This is not flexible. This is not according to my needs and according to what I need for my work, for my task, the choice how I work. So forced lockdown, forced home office is not new work. And that therefore we don't have a huge jump towards new work. And we have 8 characteristics and not only 2 that and I show you later what we had before and during the lockdown. So then the question was, we were asking already in 2016, and now again, why are we where we are? Why there are only few companies in the top right box, whereas the others are stay traditional versus overwhelmed? And one of the decisive answer is companies that go towards the new world of work, if they only work on their structures, they're lost. When we look at the success factor for new work, we find factors which we summarized in a box that we call new culture. In that new culture box, we have really cultural elements like trust culture, but we have also key characteristics describing the way leadership is practiced, leadership climate in that company, top management as a role model for new work. And we have also as a success factor the self-competencies, the competence of people to work in these flexible, agile, fluid work environments. If companies go in that new way of working, in that highly demanding form of working, and we don't have trust, we don't have the right leadership, and people don't have the competence for that, the company is overwhelmed and less successful than it was before. Now let's have a look. We did one survey that was published also in June this year, 2020, where we asked, that is a smaller sample here, but we asked it in the middle of the lockdown. We would ask people with regard to how do you practice new work. That is here the 8 characteristics that I mentioned. Individualized work, fluid working, desk sharing, mobile work, flexible working hours, virtual teams, and then the using digital technologies and digital communication. That is more the structural part, and you could see the gray is what was before Corona, and then during the lockdown, the red line. So, and what we could see is everything that was forced through the lockdown. Here we could see that companies really made a progress and got more modern, especially digital communication and virtual teams. A little bit desk sharing, fluid work, but hardly any changes. Huh? So the things that were inevitable and forced by Corona or by the lockdown, here we see a trend going forward. These questions that you see here, these 8 characteristics, are part of a check that we use in companies, and it is called New Work and Culture Check. Here you see the elements that characterize new work, that tell you, are we more in a modern world? Are we more in a traditional world? in the other, the second part of that check, the new culture, we put the success factors. Let us have a look. What are the success factors? I mentioned them already here orally, but we can see them now. These success factors tell us what characterizes the companies that go towards new work and are successful as opposed to the others that belong to the modern overstrain. And you see that it's more the soft factors. We see the top management as role model. Role model for new work, demonstrating we are modern, we work in a network organization, we trust you, we empower you, we are flexible. Leading with vision and inspiration. That is an inspiring leadership. I will give some input on that in the next part here. Culture of trust, the self-competence of people, flexible structures and use of agile methods. And again, you see the companies that had it before could even practice it in the worst phase, in the Corona lockdown. We had companies that could show this kind of leadership. The others that didn't have it before didn't develop it in the first crisis situation. The only change that we can observe here is top management as role model. We had here, we are 43 or 45, something like that before on average, and had a certain jump, but it came from a really, really, let's say, lousy level. So some took the opportunity. That explains that that explains the changes, and that explains where companies that have this cultural success factors can be highly successful in that new world of work. Just to give you
a question, Heike.
Yeah, please, Caitlin.
We have a question. How do the results of the new work survey correspond to the business fields, the different branches of business?
This one? Or these results, or the one before? Here we have certain industries that are clearly ahead, and we can also see that smaller companies are clearly ahead. Often, of course, companies that rely on place-bound work are less modern when you have production sites here, or you have a coiffeur that can also not do home office, or the driver of a bus or so. Of course, that has an impact. Smaller companies more agile, IT companies much more agile in it. But what is very interesting for us is often the significant differences within industries. Within the same industry, we have differences. And then this study here is to compare across companies. What is also particularly interesting is when you do a deep dive, you do within one company, and then you can see the differences. Of course, production, you can only use certain forms of new work, and others, the mobile work, you cannot use, or in a very limited form. But it's interesting what these companies do in the areas where you have the choice. Where you do have the choice, and to see differences, it often belongs. It's so much related to the culture. Do we have an input culture where people pay attention how long you work, in many projects you are, how many projects you are, whether you make a big effort, or the companies that have an output culture, they say it matters the result. How you achieve that result, when you do it, where you do it, is up to you. We trust you. Make the best of it. So when companies have an input culture, even if they could add flexibility and have virtual work and mobile work, they often don't do it. Related also to their leadership culture. in it. Huh? So in that, and we cannot maximize new work, but we can help companies to use it in a smart form so that it fits their tasks and the preference of people. There are people who want to work in their office. They want to come to the office. And we have to give them the choice and give them a desk. And I am really skeptical and say don't do it with the companies that now go with efficiency and cost saving and save so much space and take people symbolically the place to work. You have a place in our company, huh? Because then again, you force people not to come in the office. It's not good. Give them a choice.
Do you, a personal question, do you think the companies will learn from the experience of everyone being forced at home to realize that this is not going to work?
I hope. I see companies that take these big opportunities and said, "Oh, we were not sure whether it would work. Now we have seen that people work, and that we can trust people. We are surprised how positive the results are." And later in the presentation, I have also recommendations how to really now develop systematically the culture and build on this positive experience, because just saying, "Oh, now we have it," is not enough. We have to, and that is the big opportunity, build on the positive experience. And we have seen the people in most companies, I hear that people have done their best, they have all contributed in these difficult times. And now it's time to acknowledge this and make this part of our trust culture. We have seen it works. And for others, we have the exact opposite. And I think this is part of the biggest mistakes that are currently made, to say, "Hey, yeah, and now it's time to come back. Now it's time that we show that we work and everything is all in order again." That is the opposite. This is slap in the face of people who have given their best in this time. And when you hear this, is more some weeks ago. Now we are back to that forced period again, more or less. But before, when we had the choice to say, "Now it's time to come back," and you start working again, there is no appreciation. Is the opposite of appreciation for people who have shown, "You can trust us, we give our best." So that is destroying value and destroying culture. This is, as I said, the crisis will show for the ones that take the opportunity, and we have also the others, and we see the pattern that go straight in the wrong direction. With this. Still, okay. I show you this one, the data. This one maybe it's interesting for you. We have developed this new work on culture check. This gives you some insight how we use it in practice. It takes about 5 minutes. You can do that on the smartphone. On the left hand, you can see the elements of new work. In the middle, you have these success factors, the new culture, and I circulated the yellow ones because I would now make a zoom into that top management, the leadership. What do we need here? Because the strongest driver of positive effects from new work. This one we use also as a kind of practical tool, as a starting point often for new work transition where you can see, okay, where are the gaps? Right now we are in contact with some companies where we said, where do you stand right now? And where do you want to be end of 21? And then you can see, this is the gap that we have. We can also start to talk about our perception of different dimensions of new work. So makes this often a little bit fuzzy construct of new work and new leadership tangible, and then you can talk about it. Just to give you some impression here, it looks a little bit here like this, but is exactly what we have spoken about, the 8 elements. And someone added agile methods on the left hand, so it's 9 in this format. On the one hand, it's more the structural part, and then the cultural part as the success factors is what we need in order to be successful with the new work. And when you have a strong new culture, that means you have the choice with regard to new work. You have the choice. I would not maximize new work here. If it fits to your industry, if it fits to your task, also to your preferences, you go like this. If you say no, for us, we need only certain elements of new work, or we want to be more traditional, that's fine as well. The high-performing, the traditional high performers, they are all strong on high culture, on new culture, but they choose to be a little bit traditional in the way they work. It's not necessarily the worst way. Going forward, I'm convinced we need to be in that new work just to be attractive for young generation. But that's a different thing. Now, new leadership. What is? I took 2 decisive elements here. One is unbossing, and the other one is inspiration. Again, based on the patterns, based on the empirical results, and the strongest driver of success when companies use new work is modern leadership here. And one thing I want to put in the center first, again, the practical challenges. First, laissez-faire, the experience of no leadership. I don't feel my boss. Where is my leader? Where's my boss? Where's my manager? I don't feel that someone exists here. Disorientation. What about my goals, priorities?
Sorry, can I ask a question, please?
Yeah.
The last slide, please. No, where? Yes, here. We can see a dynamic performance index. I just want to know for the how is it today, and the how I reach it. Why this gap? Is it due to the pandemic or? I just want to understand more here.
We always, when we use this as a practical tool right now, we always ask, what is it like today? November 2020, what is it like? And then realistically, where can we be if we go forward end of 21, for example? Often, companies cannot develop illusions how agile, how successful, how energetic they become, but they say we have certain plans going forward. So that is this discrepancy between where you are today and where you are going forward. So, and that helps you then to say, oh, what are the milestones? What are the actions we want to take? Okay. Here, for example, in this graph, you could see a discrepancy between the self-competence of people today and what they wish in 21. So they would have to establish their self-leadership, shared leadership, border management, so that I can really decide when I work and when it's free time here. So you can clearly see where the discrepancies is, and we do that with HR teams, or we do that also with top management teams, with the executive board, for entire companies, but also for middle management, our team. How do we want to work? And also
okay, but so I'm sorry, and here, how is it today? We don't have how was it maybe yesterday. So how can we measure it? Or
for this one, it's just subjective, an indicator of performance. Are we a high-performing team, or are we really in our high-performance phase, or are we struggling with performance at the moment? And this one is just one example of a company here. That's here. You can do it for entire companies, but often we take it as a starting point just to be able to talk about it. Huh? And when we can, when we work with single companies, we look at hard performance factors also over the time. How you can add that. This one is very simple, very takes, when you take the questionnaire, it takes 3 minutes on your smartphone, and then you get it. Life assessment.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you for asking. Thanks a lot. Huh?
Thanks.
Thanks, Anna. So isolation is an issue. People feel left behind. They feel I'm left behind here. And virtual leaders ask myself, how can I inspire people from a distance? How can I do that so that people are emotionally involved when I don't see them? So that are things we struggle here. So two inputs here. One is this one. When it comes to new work and new leadership, there's often the claim to get rid of leadership. Leadership is seen as old, traditional. We need to overcome hierarchies. We need to, you see the book here, kein Mensch braucht Führung, says not a single individual needs leadership. So we get really, really strong statements. So the question is new leadership, no leadership? That is the biggest risk here. That is a mistake that I see in quite a number of companies. They weaken leadership because they criticize leadership so much. So what we need is something we call unbossing, is the term for it. Take counterproductive hierarchical leadership out. Take command and control out. Take authoritarian leadership out. Yeah, all this top-down management aspects. That is not positive, of course, for new leadership. But the greatest risk is if you only focus on unbossing and taking out, you get the most counterproductive form of leading people, and that is laissez-faire. Don't allow laissez-faire to emerge. But the more you take out, the more you want to strengthen real leadership, good leadership, positive leadership instead of management. Yeah, so that is, don't fall into that risk to criticize leadership as a whole and say we need to get rid of this. This leads into the overwhelmment, into the companies that are less successful with new work because you desperately need good leadership in the new work context. What kind of leadership do you need? I took our cathedral here from St. Gallen as a picture for it. Why? I want to share a concept with you that is a concept that is not new, that has been developed in the US, and I like to go to the go back to the first publication that's from 1985 already, a concept that's called transactional and transformational leadership, or transactional and inspirational leadership, describes the most effective form of leading people that is known. That was already before new work. Dozens of or thousands, even thousands of empirical studies that show that's the most effective form of leading people that is known. We ourselves, we work massively with it in both in theory, in practice. We bring in these tools into companies. Now, in the new work context, the inspirational turned out to be the strongest success factor that we could find. And in the pandemic, in that Corona time, I would emphasize this very much. What does it involve? It has two elements. One is the more transactional, is more the rational, the form of leading. And here it's about defining clear goals, monitoring results, giving very open, instant feedback, and then rewarding success. And is also part of the element punishing failure. That is the transaction. The one that do a good job get more, the one that do a bad job get less or even negative. So in the new work transformation, we could see that some companies, or quite a number of companies, had an over-transactional form of leadership, and that was taken out. If they had a very, very strong KPI logic, everybody in his little box would have certain KPIs, and people were running after KPIs in order to get their bonus. That is transactional in a less positive form, and we have quite a number of companies that have an over-transactional leadership. So recommendation is to de-emphasize this transactional leadership and use the positive forms. What people need, especially in virtual context, in rapid change context, and now in these home office contexts, is a clear idea what are the results that are expected. Feedback is very important, and also recognition. Especially when people are working from home and they are not trained to work from home, and when their private life is also present in there, they need that to limit also or to have a border between working life and private life in that time. So there was this desire to have more of this transactional in a positive form, precise goals, also priorities that you sharpen in a very turbulent time. The emphasis is traditionally, and should also be now, on the inspirational leadership. Here, role model behavior, and you want to have people that are inspired and that work not only because they want to have a bonus, but because they identify, they see the purpose, they see the meaning, they are convinced I'm doing something that is needed and that is meaningful. So role model behavior is important. So make sure the people see you. They see you even during this crazy time here. They have a picture of you and know you are inspired, you work hard, you commit also to the shared goals. The heart of this inspirational motivation is inspiring motivation here, and that is working with a vision. Therefore, I have the cathedral. And I encourage each leader, each manager, each top manager, no matter where you lead, whether it's formal or informal, to share explicitly a picture of the future. Where do you want to go as a company, as a team, as a project? And make it even more explicit, invest even more time in painting that picture, that vision for the desired future in those times. Why? It is not only important in this turbulent time that you have something here, it is also important for every individual to know I'm doing something meaningful. I contribute to something bigger than my little square or than my little KPI. And there comes the story with the cathedral into the game. There's this little anecdote, some man hammering a stone, and you ask, what are you doing? In a transactional world, he says, I'm hammering 50 stones and I get 70 francs. It's also important. He knows how much he earns. It's important. But in an inspirational context, in a transformational leadership context, he says, I'm building a cathedral. He's just hammering a stone. And but it's important that he knows that it is, he makes a significant contribution that matters. I'm contributing to something meaningful here. And we have quite a number of people hammering stone, doing seemingly simple, banal tasks. And if they feel like people who are just hammering stones to earn their money, we are lost. And we are lost already before new work, in a new work context, and in this period now. Really, we lose people. People feel not connected. They feel not appreciated. They feel not part of something that matters here. And they also emotionally burn out if they don't see why it is important. And that is a very active leadership world to say, hey, how is your task related to the future at the moment? And that is also related to some trends, to the purpose, to the passion, to the inspiration. Yeah, It is not just a fashion. It is something that always people wanted. The young generation is leaving the company if you don't do that. And in the virtual working context, you lose people because then you lose the emotional connection to them if you don't do that. So I encourage very much to work that in cathedral with the vision, with, hey, well, what are we doing? Why is it meaningful? And what are you contributing? The other things is also intellectual stimulation, so that you encourage people to think out of the box, to be creative, and to coach each person individually so that he or she grows and feels, hey, I can contribute, I can grow, and I feel inspired, and I'm important here. So that is this. During the, we collect data, not only on new work, on energy, but also on leadership here continuously. It's part of the new work and culture check, especially the inspirational. And we could find that during the lockdown, it's again data from the lockdown, you see leading with vision and inspiration. There was, especially the darker gray one, there was this perception, I need more of this transformational, especially the lower levels here. And the other thing that I circulated there that I emphasized here, we had that desire for more leadership, not only in the employee or in the lowest level. Here we could see that leaders had the need for more leadership from the top, from role models, from inspiration, from showing, hey, there's a future here. Especially the middle management was suffering there and was.
Heike?
Yeah.
I don't mean to be impolite, and I'm really interested.
I will continue, huh? I will go fast, right? Huh?
Yes, please.
Yeah.
A little,
okay.
Because we are over time a bit.
Yeah, okay. New work transformation, do's and don'ts. We put in it here some don'ts that we observe, some myths, some pitfalls. We published it also recently. This is just let go. Doesn't work. Home office, there's this misunderstanding. Home office, people want home office for private purposes. No, it's new work is something that makes us more successful and that we should need in order to be competitive going forward. Less leadership is a misunderstanding. We cannot allow laissez-faire during this time. We need stronger leadership, but positive leadership. Back to the past is not an option right now. We cannot go back. That is not possible. And establishing new work from the top is also not realistic. Some recommendations how to go to the transformation that I consider to be important and urgent at the moment. Be aware it's urgent at the moment. Normally, leadership and culture is never urgent, but at the moment it's urgent because this is so uncertain. You need to shape it at the moment because it's not in balance. We want visible commitment from the top. Paint the picture of the future, the cathedral. What does it look like? What is also our way of working in the future? Do some road mapping, huh? What are your steps? You cannot do everything at the same time. Strengthen modern leadership. So give them the tools. If you get rid of traditional things with unbossing, what are the tools? Especially the inspiration is important at the moment. The remote leadership, leading in crisis, digital leadership. There are things they need a toolbox to survive in that time, so strengthen their backbone in these difficult times. Develop the culture systematically, not a big project here, but certain cultural elements you need. For example, an output culture you need trust. So develop this in a network together with people from our levels. We recommend to do some kind of pulse check regularly to see are people healthy or are Are they suffering? Are they in the acceleration trap? Are they exhausted? Do we lose them? Are they? So to have more evidence here, make certain rules, simple rules how to deal with new work in that new situation. And maybe special rules, of course, for lockdown situations, but rules, and ensure healthy performance so that people can express when it's too much and they're operating at the limits. That is more common right now, and make it not a taboo, allow people to openly address it and take care of each other. I took this one, is German, is good. I saw this some time ago on the street, and I thought, this is what I need. We need to be convinced that ultimately it will be good. It will be good. We need to be optimistic. It's going to be a tough phase, and it's probably the toughest phase for many that have ever experienced it as a company, as an individual, but we need to believe it's good afterwards. The cathedral here, that is how it looks really. Working with the vision is important, but it should, I took that part of the picture because it's a football square there. There are young people playing football in the court of the abbey, of the cathedral here in St. Gallen. So make a vision of the future, but involve the millennials, involve the generation that don't do it top down as the established leaders. The future is something that matters for all generations. Do it jointly. And the last thing, real new work on leadership transformation is urgent, urgently needed now. Usually it's never urgent, but now it's needed. There's no alternative but going forward in a modern way. And it's possible. I hope you got some inspiration, some courage, encouragement, and some ideas what matters in that context. Thanks a lot.
As is the case for most or all of you, I have also been working from home since early March. Before March, I would go into the office maybe 3 days a week. And after this situation passes, I truly hope that I will be able to keep going, working from home, going into the office sometimes. Now, what's been really great about this is the ability to better balance my days, how it fits me, spend more time with friends and family, take care of non-work related responsibilities. But it's also been really challenging. So I think the thing I've struggled with the most is that I really haven't had as much time to talk to my coworkers to informally resolve issues or discuss questions. And I've also found it challenging to make sure that those that I supervise know exactly what they need to be doing, and for me to know what they are working on and how it is going. Conversely, I've also found that it's more difficult to communicate what I'm working on to those who are above me. And I would assume that these struggles aren't really that unique. So in this short presentation, I really want to focus on this question of how this new move towards remote work that was introduced quite quickly this year might have different effects on how we evaluate and judge work and work progress, and how that might affect men and women differently. So as I've already mentioned in my brief introduction, 2020 has really seen a large shift in how we work. And as Heike has already mentioned, this has really been not really a shift towards new work, but really a shift towards a sort of another type of static work environment, but it does look different from what we had before. So these kind of headlines are likely not going to seem unfamiliar to any of you. So on the one hand, we have seen many companies, most companies, move to work from home, or at least hybrid working model. We have also already seen many companies announcing that going forward, they will prioritize remote work more than they did previously. One really interesting thing about introducing a new policy is that once you offer something to your employees, it's actually quite quickly to fully take it away again once they are used to it. So we can really also expect that going forward, this remote work situation is going to continue more than it is right now, although hopefully may be associated with a bit more flexibility. So this term flexible work, which is often conflated with remote work or work from home, or at least was before this year, has long been seen as this sort of promised land, as this highly desirable state of working. A study of millennials at work from 2018, for example, has found that flexible work is among the top 3 wish list of millennials in their ideal place to work. Now, why is that? It allows employees to balance different aspects of their lives according to their needs. And really importantly, to many employees, the ability to flexibly manage your work time and place, location, signals that your employer, your company, and your manager places trust in you, that they trust you to work and work well in the way that you think you can do your best. So in a truly flexible work environment, you would be able to work independent of location and time. Now, as we have already learned in a previous presentation, that's really not what this is. We are working very dependent on location, at least now from the home office, or maybe to a very small extent also in the office, depending on the nature of work. Now, what would it look like for a company to do this well, to manage this flexible or remote work situation well? So in my own personal home office, so I work for a very small team at a small startup type organizations. For us, we were already relatively well prepared for flexible work or for remote work, but it wasn't as challenging. If you were only 10 people, you can introduce new structures a little bit more easily. My partner works for a large international corporation, and his team before the lockdown was already fully remote. And so in his work, I've been able to observe now firsthand that if managed well, working remotely, your team will have open and clear communication channels. So clarity on when and how and via what you can communicate with your team members and supervisors. Everyone has very transparently defined goals that are adapted to the remote work situation. And you have processes in place to track work output, progress, and performance, again, adapted to a situation where you're not necessarily seeing someone face to face. Maybe about this last point, what's really important here is that if you don't have a way to track output and focus on results, then we have the tendency to focus more on physical presence and quantity of time spent working. So you might fall into a trap where you're equating the quality of someone's work with how often you see them and how often you yourself see them doing their work, rather than focus on what they actually produce. But so if you are a company that has these 3 points in place, you have likely had, a lot of time to set up these processes and to get them right, and to grow a workplace culture that is collaborative and trust-based, where this can flourish. And that takes time. So this has not been the case this year. Of course, we had a situation where more or less from one week to the next, many companies have had to introduce remote working option and a remote working situation, not even an option, and basically set up these processes and just hope that the workplace culture might be able to adapt to a new normal. And that's really not an ideal situation. So there is a study that came out recently that has already started tracking how people fare in this sudden remote work environment. The study looks at companies from different countries and employees from different countries. And it has found that 38% of surveyed managers doubt that their employees are as effective when working remotely. And 41% doubt that employees will stay motivated over time. So as you can already see, there is a lot of uncertainty and a lot of doubt and mistrust that is spreading due to this new setup. Conversely, the same study has found that 34% of employees strongly perceive that their managers do not trust them to perform their work well. So on the one hand, managers don't believe that their employees do work well, and on the other hand, employees feel like they're not being seen in how they work. So why is this so difficult? What makes evaluating work while managing remotely in sort of a sudden, uncertain situation so challenging? So on one hand, if you are used to seeing your employees do their work, then unconsciously you're going to see that as one way that you evaluate. It's a fairly prosaic point, but really important to keep in mind. We often rely on what we can see to make judgments. So managers who cannot see their direct reports may struggle to trust that their employees are indeed working. Now, if you are struggling with that, then conversely, you might have really heightened expectations of how available your employees are. So you might expect that team members are online all the time, which actually is then bad for their work-home balance and might cause more job stress, because now it used to be that you would go to the office, you would clock in, you would do your work, you clock out, and you'd go home. But if you don't have this clear expectation of this office environment and physical presence anymore, then you might feel like you have to sort of overcompensate by always being available. And your manager is conversely feeling that if you are not, your work is not good. And the third important point here is that during times when you have a lot of uncertainty, when you have a lack of information and a lot of stress and change, that is a time when your unconscious biases are likely to become really important in your decision making. And now, what is more conducive to that than a situation where all of a sudden your team or your department is forced online and you have to completely shift how you track people's work. You have a pandemic outside, you're probably as a manager stressed because of that. So then you're much more likely to be led by your own biases. Most likely you're not fully aware of that happening. And that is going to then affect how you make judgments. And one such important judgment is how you decide of who did a good job or who did not do a good job. And one such bias that is going to really creep in that situation is the expectations about gender roles that you subconsciously hold. Now, if you remember, if you keep in mind these first two points as well, then how do gender roles come into this? So if we stay in the Swiss context, where women still perform most of the house and care work in nearly 70% of heterosexual households, according to the Federal Statistical Office's survey, managers might simply still have the expectation that women might be more distracted by this while working from home, while they're not able to physically observe the work, and thus simply assume that women's work during the pandemic isn't as good as men. Now, again, this might or might not hold for a specific individual case, but it does create an expectation and a potential bias in how your work will be evaluated in a time of uncertainty. And the second point is, especially if this distribution of workload is unequal, then during a time of crisis, for example, kids are homeschooled for a few weeks, childcare might close because of a corona case, especially in households where women do take on more care responsibilities, they might actually be working during more non-traditional times. And if managers then expect that being available at all time is the new way to measure productivity, then this will also bias decision-making against the work of women. So, key takeaway: women in this in our current situation, in this crisis-induced remote home environment, work environment, might not get full credit for their remote work, and their performance may be evaluated more negatively than men's. And what I think is also really important to keep in mind is that, especially during a crisis, the stakes are particularly high. And there's really two reasons for this right now. One, we are likely going to continue seeing companies restructuring, and the way in which many restructuring decisions can be made is that more recent events stick in our minds more. So if there will be terminations, then it is also likely that those decisions can be made in a biased way. And how well someone does in a crisis often also disproportionately gets rewarded. So if managers have gendered perceptions of who performed particularly well, then it may be more likely that men get rewarded more for their performance during this crisis. I want to stress that women may be evaluated more harshly or more negatively is really important. Biases are usually subconscious in how they affect decision making, so it's really hard to know whether this is going on. But it is really important to keep in mind that it could. So I want to close with a few points of how you can avoid, as a manager, to fall into this trap. So it's always really important to question your own assumptions and perspectives regularly, even if that's uncomfortable, because if you're aware that you might hold a certain bias, you can consciously sort of steer away from that in your decision making. You can make it as straightforward as possible for your specific employees to communicate with you. So if that's setting up set check-in times that work with the particular situation of a particular employee, so that you know when you're going to talk to each other next, rather than always looking for them. Are they online? Are they not online? So that doubt doesn't creep in at all. You can redefine the criteria for performance evaluation while working remotely, importantly with the involvement of employees, so that both sides share their expectations and understanding of how output is now seen. You can provide practical and moral support to remote working within the organization, so that employees feel both assisted but also empowered. And really important is to create a way of communicating that's more about checking in with people rather than checking up on people. And one way you can do that is, as I've just mentioned, to have set times where you communicate rather than randomly hovering over your employees. And the other is to have much more frequent feedback conversations that maybe involve more than just your own perspective. And then finally, this is a point that Heike has already gone over in her presentation, is this idea that these behaviors have to be modeled from the very top, and it has to be very clear what kind of leadership style is needed in this particular situation. Great, I think I will end here. I hope everyone was able to follow, and happy to take questions if there are any.